Hey, Ixaplex here. I'm making this video in response to the allegations being brought up about Undead Nation being stolen, and to hopefully give some insight on the matter. At base, the game was ripped from the original Nano infection. I'm going to explain the motive and series of events that lead up to Undead Nation being what it is. Back when I joined Roblox, I would only play games because they were free. I didn't have much games growing up. My parents thought they were a waste of money. Roblox opened a whole new world of possibilities for me. Back then, I didn't know Roblox was a developer's platform. I only saw it as another online gaming website such as Minuclip and Armor Games. I was very much just a kid still in elementary school. Eventually, I found out the games that were available are made by users on the platform. This intrigued me. I also learned that these games were programmed. I didn't know what programming was. As curious as I was, I searched up Roblox programming. I remember seeing my first print "Hello World" script and a very simple if statement. I decided to give it a go. As I scrolled down the wiki, everything seemed impossible and gibberish. I actually cried thinking it was too hard. I also knew I wanted to create a game on Roblox at that point. Later, I found out that these games generate tickets, a legacy form of currency that could be converted to Robux, which allowed free users to have a chance at purchasing cosmetics from the catalog at the time. You get 1 ticket for every user that plays your games, alongside the 10 tickets for daily logins. At that point, I was determined to make a game, with my only goal in mind being to gather tickets and purchase cosmetics from the catalog by converting tickets into Robux. Back then, hats and limiteds on Roblox were holy grails and players would be respected when possessing certain cosmetics. At first, I tried scripting on my own, which ultimately failed as I didn't know where to start. I was very young and had no clue what to learn first. An older user I spoke with back then told me there are games which can be copied. These are known as uncoupled games. They told me I can learn scripting from those games, which led to me finding a game named Jaws. I was surprised to find it uncopy locked as it was also a popular game at the time. This was one of the earliest instances of a game being ripped. I didn't know it was ripped when I saved the uncopy locked version. With a fully working game in my grasp and determination, I started reading and connecting the dots on how scripts and parts work together. I put in hours and hours to learn the correlation and all the moving parts of the game, which enhanced my programming knowledge at the same time. Eventually, I started modifying the game's code and adding new objects to the game. When I was happy with it, I decided to publish it and give it a test run with a friend. We started playing the game. After 5 minutes, a guest joined the game. A guest is a legacy user system on Roblox, which allowed players to play on Roblox without needing an account. However, they were not able to speak freely in game chat, nor collect badges or cosmetics. It was a system in place to allow players to try Roblox. After 20 minutes, I had 2 servers full with 10 players each. I was freaking out, noticing my tickets rising and new servers being created to welcome new players. An hour later, I've reached about 130 concurrent players and my tickets count went up by roughly 800 tickets. Back then, getting 100 concurrent users playing a game was a big deal. The game started dying down, as I wasn't experienced enough to release updates in a timely manner. I knew I had to keep going. I resorted to searching up more uncopy locked games. Once I found one I liked, I would read the code, modify it, learn how the game functions and release it within the same place slot as Jaws. That way, the game would stay relevant on the game page. This would cause a mix of old and new servers being half Jaws half whatever the new game was. I was in a phase of fame and wealth on Roblox. I would be recognized in games and treated differently because of the cosmetics I possessed. During this time, I mostly published obstacle courses as they were easy to code. Not all of them were original, I still had the copy and modifying practice in play. Whenever I published a new obstacle course, I would go off and play games that I enjoyed in the meantime. This went on for 1 to 2 years. I was a die-hard fan of co-op games, especially the zombie genre. Anything that resembled Left 4 Dead, Zombie Rescue or Survival was a must-play in my book. I sank hundreds of hours into games such as Daytime's Reason for Life. Another was Dark's Zombie Survival Tycoon, which featured the weapons from Base Wars. I ultimately loved playing Fox McBenjo's Zombie Ocean, Rescue Mission 2. One day, I had a popular obstacle course that reached the front page. A few hours later, I noticed the same obstacle course wasn't too far off of mine. I took a look into it and noticed it had all my modifications in place. It ended up surpassing my place on the front page. I was mad about this. I started hearing about places being stolen or copied without the need of being uncopy locked. Users such as Jared Valdez was infamously known for copying a multitude of games and finding success on the platform. Knowing that the uncopy locked games' quality were limited and not great in terms of longevity, I got curious and did a bit of digging. Which led me to the infamous DLL exploit. An exploit which allows anyone to open a game instance in with Roblox Studio. All you had to do was join a game and launch an executable, which then injected Roblox Studio into the game instance. Back then, playing Roblox would have the server send you a copy of the place in question. All the server scripts, local scripts, parts and assets would be sent to your machine in order to play the game. There was no server and client distinction. With the full game being sent to your machine, you can save the game instance onto your local machine. All scripts and parts intact. You'd only have to remove any excess player models or cloned scripts that were created on runtime. I knew I wanted to find a zombie game to publish it as my own. I couldn't trip any of the popular zombie games. The only good ones available were the popular ones. So I decided to search for zombie games and go through them, playing them one by one, for minutes at a time. Which then lead me to the game in question. Nano Infection. Me, being young and having played hundreds of games on Roblox, couldn't believe the gem I found that was Nano Infection. I played it for a short amount of time. Knowing about the exploit in mind, I couldn't resist but to look it up and download it. After a short tutorial video, I loaded the DLL exploit into Nano Infection. All it took was a click on File, Save As, and done. The game was on my local machine. This game was ahead of its time. Like a child on Christmas. I cleaned up any excess parts generated on runtime, which was only my player model. I then started reading the code and modifying it. Back then, all I could think of is how this game could generate tickets for me to accumulate fame and cosmetics. As a kid, this was the ultimate greed without being able to see the harm I would be causing to another human being. I just saw it as a game. I didn't think of the time and effort spent into creating games. After I was satisfied with the game, I created very poor ad banners as my artistic skills were severely lacking. I've only ever had finger painting classes and colored on papers with a brush or pencil. I sucked. I used the stock paint to create terrible ad banners for the game. I published the game in an older slot with thousands of visits to facilitate its rise as a new game. My logic was, the more places that have a high visit count, the more traffic I can get onto my profile through multiple places. I spent about 10,000 tickets on ad slots for multiple banners. Surely enough, I had about 100 players on the game within the first hour. I still didn't have a good base for programming functionalities on my own. I only understood parts of the code and had ideas of what purpose it serves. I was impressed with the quality of the game. But there was no way I would be able to keep up the quality. When the game got popular, the original creator, Boom444444, confronted me about the game. This is where a kid's greed really evolved. I threw my friend under the bus claiming he stole the game for me. As deep down, I knew I did something wrong. I never thought of myself as a bad person. I just didn't realize the heart and sweat it takes to create a game at the time. I just wanted to get fame and wealth, as any kid would want on Roblox. To stand out and be part of the big boys. Whenever Nano Infection received an update, I would use the DLL exploit to incorporate the updates into Undead Nation. From memory alone, Chapters 1 to 5 were completed at the original time of exploit. Chapter 6 was the final update that was ripped from Nano Infection. After a few more confrontations, I ended up banning Nano Infection's creator and any friends supporting him from the game, as I tried to cover any tracks leading to the game being copied. With the bans in place, the voices were drowned out by the player base that came to love Undead Nation. As a kid, I only had one thing on my mind: fame and wealth. I caught on that Nano Infection was not receiving sufficient updates anymore. If I remember, the place was inactive and I was locked out of any potential updates. I was then forced to learn, create and start making original content for the game. Which is when Undead Nation started branching off from Nano Infection. As a matter of fact, Undead Nation has been ripped multiple times. Except for whatever reason, Roblox decided to permanently remove and even ban users that re-uploaded the game. I suspect it's because of how unique the game was. They acknowledged the fact that it was being ripped by other users. I didn't have the best hardware at the time. I was running Roblox on a potato computer. Back in the day, Roblox terrain wasn't very well optimized and had a great load on my computer. I knew I couldn't continue developing on Roblox terrain, not only because of performance impacts, but also the impatience of wanting to learn the terrain tool. I resorted to opening a new place file and creating a map with regular base parts. Then, cloning it into Undead Nation's home place. I'd make some final adjustments and tuning. Then the game gets published with a new update. This technique was used from the start of Chapter 7. I was on and off of the platform during high school. I was maturing and also had the opportunity to take a computer class. My programming skills started drastically improving during high school. Not only from Roblox, but I took a liking to Unity by recommendation of my professor. As I started learning how to code and create games with Unity engine, I realized how much time and effort it takes to make a game. Undead Nation was still somewhat popular and my programming skills improved. I was able to understand how to create original content. However, there was an instance where it hit me. The guilt of its dark history weighing on my shoulders. Every time I'd see, open and modify the game, I'd always have this one question in the back of my mind. Why is this game still active? Should I deactivate it? Then eventually, Roblox introduced their new server, client update. A game-breaking change that ruined the functionality of Undead Nation. I figured that it was my opportunity to set the game to inactive. I did just that. However, the rising issue was the player base. Players were being punished by not having access to Undead Nation. I kept piling up messages from players asking me to fix and republish the game. More guilt was felt when players would express how they've spent the last of their Robux on game passes. I didn't want to scam any of them wrongfully. It was really tough on me. I had to pick between the players and the authenticity of the game. I ended up reprogramming roughly 90% of the game from scratch to support this new update. No offense to Boom444444, Nano Infection's creator. Their programming skills at the time of my child self were impressive. However, as I got more experienced in game programming and coding practices, I realized how much of a disaster the code base became when my younger self piled on terrible code onto mediocre code. I was self-taught after all. Although the game did get ripped from Nano Infection at the core, all that remained after the server client update was mostly a skeleton of assets and models. Not that these updates excuse the initial act. It showed me that I cared about the game. It became a passion to work on it, make it my own, and make it better. It wasn't just a currency or fame motive anymore. It was for the user experience. For the fans that have grown up, and supported, and stuck around to play the game for many years. The guilt, however, remained. Deep down inside, I knew how much blood and sweat it takes to develop a game. Let alone create it from the ground up with your own ideas and skills. The update was done over weeks of work. It still felt wrong to republish the game. Even when most of it has been rewritten. I still had pressure from the fans supporting the game. It was a guilt I kept shouldered for years to come. With every update and mention of Undead Nation. It still crosses my mind from time to time until this day. Whenever I see any sign of Roblox, I think back on the dark roots of the legacy that I built. I'm not proud from its origin. I hate to live my life knowing that I've permanently impacted another human's life. And not in a good way. Although I may never be able to completely free myself from the dark roots that have kept a bind on me from a kid that once was. Boom444444. From the adult speaking to you now through this message, on behalf of a greedy, unsympathetic, ignorant and clueless kid, whose burden I've had to carry for a long time. For all the harm, misery and discredit my kid self has caused you over the years. I truly understand what it means to be a developer. I am sorry. If I could go back and stop myself from doing such actions, I would do it in a heartbeat. All I can ask for is your forgiveness. Truly understand that these actions were of a kid. I ask you to treat them as such. To all the fans who had to learn this dark truth, I apologize for keeping such a dark root hidden so low beneath the dirt. It's been on my mind ever since I became aware of my actions way back in 2015 to 2017. Please understand that I placed myself in a position that made me scared to speak, but also ashamed to speak from past actions. I was so ashamed of what was done on Xplex's account that I wanted a fresh start as a proper developer by making a new account, which led to the creation of Alpha. All my studies of game development converged into one project, which unfortunately had to be discontinued due to being busy in life and now with the programming job. As for Boom 444444, I am more than happy to take down the game if you deem it be. I thank you for indirectly setting me on a programming path through your game. Your skill was at an outstanding level back then. I can't imagine what you're creating now. I wouldn't have reached this point of my life if it wasn't for the motivation that has been set by Nano Infection, Undead Nation. Think of me as you see fit. A stealer, copier, thief, fake. At the end of the day, these were the actions of a kid. I didn't know better. I acknowledge the damage I've caused and am trying to make amends with not only everyone involved, creators and fans, but myself as well. Please, find it in your hearts to reason. Boom 444444, I wish you all the best in life. Sincerely, your biggest supporter, fan, and student.